Hi there, thank you for checking out this new message from Ridgepoint. We've got a different but a fun one for you today. About once a year, we have a special Sunday called Student Sunday, where we hand the keys over to our student ministry, and our middle school and our high school students lead us in worship. Today we'll be hearing a message from Pastor Kyle Goings, who leads our Next Gen ministry, and he does a really great job. Today's theme is a word that you've maybe heard just a couple times this year, eras. Throughout our church's history, God has really blessed our student ministry, and great things are also happening right now with Ridgepoint's young people. Today, Pastor Kyle takes us back to our roots. We provide some fun updates about our current student ministry, and we will look ahead to where we believe God is taking us in this next era. So for much more, Kyle, take it away.
Hello, my name is Kyle Goings. I oversee middle school, high school, and young adults in the 20s and 30s here at Ridgepoint Church. Welcome to Student Sunday, where we do things a little different. This year, we're actually going to go back in time and look at the different eras of youth ministry throughout our church's history. If you are here and not necessarily just watching online, there is in the upper lobby a whole memory wall of pictures. And some of you in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s are on that wall on that. So you can definitely take it down afterwards. So what I want to do this morning is kind of invite you to go on a journey with me. I want you to think back when you were a teenager, okay? Might be a little bit longer journey for some, but think back when you were a teenager. What was your life like, okay? Were you shy or loud? Were you awkward? Did you have the big hair? All right. What was some of the fun things you did? Think back when you were 16. What was your faith like? Did you have a chance to maybe grow up in the church and have a youth group experience? Or did you maybe find God after high school and didn't necessarily have that church experience when you were a teenager? For me, I grew up in the middle of Iowa, and I grew up in the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s at a Baptist church. I accepted Christ at a very young age, and so I got the whole youth ministry experience. This is a picture of some of my people in my youth group on that. And so, as you can see, it was in the 90s, so they had the frosted tip hair, all right, the choke chains. That was the cool style back then. Do you see me? Let me point me out really quick. Right there. Yeah, that's my brother sitting on top of me and all that. I love this youth group. I was shy at school, but I came alive at youth group because this was the place where I felt loved and accepted. This is a place where I could find myself and be myself, and I would spend every waking minute at youth group if I could. The leaders would literally have to kick me out every Wednesday night after youth group just because I just didn't want to go home. I loved God and the church so much because of the people like this. Another picture I have is this when I was probably 16, 17 years old. These are my two best friends, Nate and Sam. They were instrumental in my faith journey. They encouraged me, they challenged me, they accepted me, and we kind of challenged each other. I did Bible studies and mission trips with these people. And I went on trips as well, some spiritual trips like a mission trip, some just fun trips like a canoe trip. That's me trying to look cool, the backwards hats on there. This was a silly little canoe trip. There was no spiritual element or plan for it, but here's what's interesting. On this trip, one of my friends got the chance, and he shared with me that his parents were going through a divorce, and it was just breaking him. And I got a chance to share how my parents went through a divorce, and even though it was tough, my faith grew during that time and not fall away. And it was the first time I really felt used by God to share my experience and my gifts to help someone else. And it was a moment in time for me that I'll remember forever, and it was a silly little canoe trip. The last picture I have for you is this is my youth pastor, Chris. He was instrumental to me in my life. He saw more potential in me than I even saw in myself. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for God using Chris to impact me when I was a teenager. So we are all on a spiritual journey. I don't know if you know that or not. We're all on a spiritual journey, and we think that we're kind of like a steady incline, that the older we get and the more time we are a Christian, the more natural we are in our spiritual growth. That we're just somehow more mature 10, 20 years into the faith. And it's not a steady incline. It looks more like this. It's a jagged journey. Our spiritual journey, all right, has peaks and valleys. It has times of plateauing when it just feels like we're kind of going through the Christian motions, if you will. And I want to focus on these dots here. And these dots are spiritual markers. All right? These spiritual markers are experiences or events that happens that leads to immense amount of spiritual growth or maturity. And I would love to think they're just naturally there, but it's a lot of times random to our perspective. And these experiences, these spiritual markers can be anything. It can be a positive experience, like going on a mission trip, like the Peru mission trip we just heard about a couple of minutes ago. Or it can be a negative experience, maybe a loss of a loved one, and it was a crucial time in your life. It could be an influential relationship, like a small group leader or a parent. It could be a ministry opportunity where you are using your spiritual gifts and talents, all right, for God's glory. It could be a new teaching or a biblical principle you discovered or learned. It could be a spiritual discipline or a habit that forms a new way of living or viewing the world. It could be any of these things. Now, what these spiritual markers do is to help keep our spiritual bearings, and it's designed to help us remember what God did during that time of our lives. In the Old Testament days, in the biblical days, what they would do, God's people, would actually build altars or memorials to remember God's mighty works. And these would be like piles of stone, okay, to remember that. And the greatest example is found in Joshua chapter 4. Now, Joshua chapter 4, we have Joshua, the leader of the Israelites. He is leading the people into the promised land, all right? But before he can do that, after 40 years in the wilderness, they have to cross the Jordan River, and it's very dangerous and difficult. So what they decided to do is listen to God, which is good advice, all right? And God actually provided a miracle, holds back the waves, and the Israelites could go across on dry land. Right after this experience, when they get to the other side into the promised land, here's what it says in Joshua chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. He told them, "Go into the middle of the Jordan, in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it on your shoulder. 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. We will use these stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children will ask, 'What do these stones mean?'" Verse 7. "Then you can tell them, 'They remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the ark of the Lord's covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever.'" Joshua knew that every generation needed memorials to remind people of God's mighty works. All right? Every generation needs that. It's not just about the big stones. It's about these stones actually weren't just for this generation. It was for all generations that were going to come across this pile of stones. And then it's that generation's responsibility to say, hey, here's what these stones mean when they ask the question. These stones and these memorials are a connecting point for both past, present, and future generations. That God is not done, that he's always at work, that he loves us, that he cares for us, that he interjects, all right, into our lives. He's not some distant being. These memorials are important. Our phones, all right, are full of memorials, whether we realize it or not. It's pictures full of our social media feeds of an experience that happened in our lives, and we can think back of what our life was like during that time. People can also be living reminders of what God has done in that life, or your life. In our student ministry, we focus on two things pretty heavily because they are the best spiritual markers that we know of, all right? Relationships and experiences. We provide deep, meaningful relationships, and we have small group leaders that stay with them for years, all right? So your small group leaders your freshman year, ideally, it's the same small group leader your senior year because we know trust takes time. We also know that experiences are crucial to that. Look, it's important to learn about the Bible, but you also have to experience the Bible, not just in your head, but also in your heart. After 20 years of working with teenagers, here's what we've learned, right? That faith is more effectively shared through example rather than instruction. Let me put it another way. Faith is better caught than taught. Now, you need instructions, right? But if you have a teenager in your life, have they done everything you've instructed them to do always? No, all right? If you are, if you are a parent that your teenager has done everything you've instructed them to do, we'd love to have a webinar from you, and you can teach all of us how to do it. But the bottom line is, we are individuals still trying to figure it out, and we're all on this spiritual journey. You need instruction, you need teaching, but you also need examples to follow, both in words and in deeds. And so Psalms 145:4 says this: "Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power." Now here's the thing. Some versions of this have generation to generation tell of your mighty acts. It's a pretty powerful verse. It talks about the responsibility that each generation has for the next. Now, I thought we'll have some fun this morning, and so I took that verse, and we now live in a unique age where we have ChatGPT and AI and all of that. So I decided to take that verse and put it in the language of Gen Z. All right, Gen Z is anyone aged 7 through 27, so teenage lingo, if you will. And I put that in the ChatGPT, and here's what it comes out. Okay, this is Gen Z speak. All right. Every Gen Squad should spill the tea and hype up the next crew about your epic wins. They got to flex on your power stories. Amen? Now, that might not sound like English to you, okay? And that's fine. But I had a chance to look that over, and if you really dive deep, I actually think it explains the verse quite well. I mean, proclaim your power is nice. But flex on your power stories, that makes a better t-shirt. Right? But here's the best part. It doesn't matter if it's a New Living Translation or if it's Gen Z, the meaning is the same. That we all have a responsibility and the privilege to tell the next generation about how God has worked in our lives. Right? The author was emphasizing the ongoing tradition of each generation transmitting stories of God's mighty deeds to the next. The question is how? How do we share of God's mighty deeds? And I actually can spend hours talking about prayer and going into their world and volunteering and serving and all that. But I can actually summarize everything up into 3 simple words that I've seen the most effective way to pass on to the next generation. And these words are: priorities create legacies. Priorities create legacies. The younger generation watches how we prioritize things in our lives, the good and the bad. And it serves as a template for younger generation that they see what is important in our lives, and it becomes a value or an inherent belief to their lives. This goes beyond church attendance. This goes about how you talk about God and how you talk about the church around the dinner table. And you know when our priorities truly shine? It's when we're hurt, when we're confused, when we're lost, when we're busy. That's when our priorities truly shine, and then the younger generation is watching. Now here's the thing. Here's the reality. What we prioritize as an individual, what we prioritize as a family, and what we prioritize as a congregation becomes our church's legacy. And I had a chance to go back in time, if you will, and look at some history of our church. And I would say that our church's legacy is pretty good. We've had a pretty good legacy when it comes to this. Our church has been it actually started in 1943, okay? And it had different locations all over Wichita throughout our history. We've had different staff and pastors leading it. We've even had different names of a church. But you know what? We haven't gotten everything right either. We've made some missteps along the way. But what I've looked back and I've seen is, I'm guessing many of us are here today because a previous generation or someone older than you made the choice to take the time and invest in you. I know I'm the product of that. And looking back in our church history, we have decades upon decades of people stepping up and faithfully serving and leading the next generation. And so the rest of our time today is just going to do just that. We're going to hear from the different eras. We're going to hear from people from the different eras, and we kind of divide them up into years of 20 to hear about their experience when there was life as a teenager. And you're going to hear from adults that still go to this church that are saying, okay, here's what life was like in my teenage years. And so I want you to, when you're watching the videos and hearing the stories, I want you to think about, all right, what was their spiritual markers in their lives and how they got to the point where they are here. Let's start with the era of the 60s and 70s.
Thanks to Pastor Kyle and to all of our students who had a hand in planning today's service. There are often a lot of stereotypes that come along with teenagers, and not all of them are always very positive. But I'll tell you, we have some really great students and leaders in our student ministry, and they have so many positive traits to help lead our church into the future. I think we have some really strong and exciting eras ahead of us. Now, before we let you go today, the first thing I wanted to say, if you yourself are a student, middle school, all the way up through college age, if you're not plugged in here yet, we have a spot for you. As you could probably tell from today's service, our student and young adult ministry is active and growing and full of really great people. So if you've been hesitant to get involved, or maybe you're newer to the Wichita area, I encourage you to take a risk and come check out our ministries. A good place to start would be to check out our website at ridgepointwichita.com. There you can go to the Connect tab at the top, and then you can select either Students or 2030 and check out all that we have to offer. We would love to get to know you, show you around, and help you get plugged in. And now that we're in April, the countdown is on to summer and to the end of the school year. For those of you with kids at home of all ages, or maybe you're a younger adult looking for an excuse to stay in touch with your friends over the summer, we have a ton of options for you. So as you're putting together your summer schedule, I encourage you to check out ridgepointwichita.com/summer, or there's also a link right on our homepage with a long list of all the events and activities going on at Ridgepoint this summer. We have a VBS coming up in June for kids finishing kindergarten all the way up through 5th grade, summer camps for 3rd grade all the way through high school seniors, video game tournaments, splash pad meetups, the 2030 Olympics, so many things. So you can check out all those details online, and please make Ridgepoint part of your summer plans. Now, if you come to pretty much everything we offer, or maybe again, you just recently checked us out for the first time around Easter, wherever you're at on that spectrum, you are welcome here and we would love to have you. So we hope to see you at some of these upcoming summer events. And speaking of Easter, the past few weeks have been a little different from what we might consider a normal Sunday around here with Palm Sunday and Easter and Student Sunday. So we invite you to join us again next Sunday as Pastor Brent will be back and we'll be diving into our next teaching series from the book of John in the New Testament, where we look at what would Jesus pray. We're looking forward to this series and we hope you'll join us. So we'll see you again next time.